So Affinity Designer 1.8 has made its release. I was shocked to see how quickly it came out because there was no word about it previously. Usually there are beta versions before the first commercial release. So I see that the program introduced very few new features compared to previous commercial versions, but a whole lot of bug fixes. That actually made me happy if you saw my previous video on the different bugs caught in Designer. So I took this as a possibility that they may have worked harder on correcting the bugs than bringing new features, which I think would be the appropriate thing to do, and that may have very well been the case. However, as an honest review, trying 1.8 for myself, I was quite disappointed. Just like the release of 1.7, I felt it was very rushed. So I'll explain why I feel that way. The reason I first got into Affinity was because I felt it stood out from other competitors. A staff member mentioned on the forums that rather than just release new features, they like to release them a certain way. And according to what I've experienced, I can very well agree with that claim. In terms of design, functionality, pricing, and knowledge, it takes a different route from other competitors. I personally don't like too many mainstream products because of how they push monthly subscription, do not focus much on the design, and overall it feels too unfriendly for my taste. The appearance of Affinity Designer was the first thing that stood out to me, and after hearing all the other commitments, it seemed perfect to me. It felt very unmodern, and I could tell it was aimed more towards the people. It was so clear that Affinity was consistent. However, I noticed that after the release of 1.7, there was a slip in performance. The processing became slower, there were a lot more bugs, plus older unaddressed ones. The contrast and grading of the UI started shifting, and I felt it overall started turning away from what made it unique. These things may sound pretty common, but to me, I love Affinity because of how uncommon it is. To me, I felt it was starting its new software era, but then kind of fell in the direction of others. And I don't mean for this to sound like I'm bashing the program, because I still think Affinity is probably one of the few software developers that are very, very fair to customers. This review is just my personal opinion. Now, there are a huge amount of bugs that have been fixed, and the one that most likely makes Designer 1.8 great is fixing the expand stroke issue. However, it is quite frustrating to see how none of the bugs in my previous video were fixed. Joining paths with insert inside will result them to disappear. There is still drag after deletion. The whole document changes color if you select multiple layers at once, with pixel layers being one of them, and then the pixel layer converts into just boxes of color. And there are many more. And I know that people report bugs all the time, so not all awareness can be heard. But for a commercial release, this one didn't really take the time to have customers test a beta version first. Aside from bug corrections, I don't feel there were as many new features than in previous versions. There is the template feature, which is great, the new stocks panel, an updated list of Pantones, slight changes on the interface, and there are some other tweaks that I don't think were mentioned. I'll make a video on something that really caught my attention that I will be using quite a lot. And something that I did find very useful in this version that was not in 1.7 is that all of my brushes and styles were successfully transferred over without the need of having to import them again. In my opinion, Designer 1.6 was the best. I wonder if during the release of 1.7, the release of Affinity Publisher added pressure to the team because of how long people have been waiting for it. So in that case, I understand to have all three programs released at the same time in order for a publisher's persona icons to work. However, when 1.8 came out, I think more time should have been needed before official release. So I made this video in hopes to see Affinity get those bugs squared away and make its comeback and crush Adobe like bricks.